Joe Rogan recently interviewed Fedor Gorst, the first pro pool player on his podcast. Some people have criticized the interview for talking too much about drugs and gambling, claiming that's not good for pool. But is that what really happened? Is talk of pool's seedy reputation a bad thing? Who is Joe Rogan? For those of you who don't know, just Google him. But Joe Rogan's career started out as a comedian, and he's a UFC commentator, host of the TV show Fear Factor, but he grew to widespread fame due to his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. On his podcast, Joe interviews UFC fighters and comedians. But aside from that, a large part of his show is oriented towards personal improvement, science, sports fitness, physical and mental health, and training, but with an eagerness to investigate, shall we say, alternative treatments, as you can surmise from his logo. But Joe has been a pool player since his early 20s in New York City, and he was instructed by Max Eberly.
Max Eberly helped my game tremendously.
So Joe did not learn about pool from Fedor. I assembled a list of general topics that Joe and Fedor discussed on the podcast. You can pause the screen to read them, and of course, do watch the podcast. It's fantastic. Out of the 19 or so times that the conversation took a turn in subject, the subculture of pool came up just 5 times. In fact, Joe used the term subculture twice in the interview, once in the very beginning and once towards the end. And he talked frequently about how interesting that subculture is.
And he was with this guy, and the guy goes, "Look at that guy, President of the United States, and he can't make a ball." That's how pool players think.
Yeah.
They don't give a f*** about you if you can't play pool.
You and I are part of that subculture, and so is Joe. 5 times the discussion turned to just a general discussion of professional pool today and what might be coming for professional pool. The remaining 9 topics, nearly half of the interview, were about Fedor's life of pool, how difficult the game is, his equipment, and training. So was it bad for pool that the discussion talked about drugs and gambling in pool's history and today? Well, was it bad when the TV show 60 Minutes interviewed Shane Van Boening and brought it up?
How can a sport thrive at the highest level when so much of it exists in the shadows? The signs say no smoking and no gambling, and we sure didn't see any smoking.
Consider the 2 most popular movies ever made about pool. The Hustler.
You like to gamble, Eddie? Gamble money on pool games?
And The Color of Money.
20 a rack.
Yeah, 500 a rack.
Oh, are you serious?
I never kid about money.
Were those bad for pool? Look, as pool players, we cannot deny the history of pool, any more than we can deny the failures of professional pool in the past. Joe mentioned Matchroom and what they are doing for pool and 9-ball, and the 60 Minutes segment with Shane Van Boening ended with some clips of Emily Frazier.
All of the basement tables and the money matches, I think that's brilliant. And that can I think that's fantastic because it's got the history behind it.
But there was another similarity between those 2 interviews.
I'm a tournament player again. I'm not an action player.
You cannot gamble. You know, it got to be a clean sport.
Now, some have criticized these comments because both Fedor Gorst and Shane Van Boening have played big money matches on a streaming service online. But that doesn't have anything to do with drugs or the underbelly of pool. In fact, I would suggest it's more similar to a boxing match where the winners and losers prize amount is determined in advance.
They do it in a live stream, and they make it like a one-on-one tournament.
It's not a gambling match where the 2 players play until one goes broke or there's any kind of underhandedness going on. I can even imagine a time in the future where $1 million purse is put up for a multi-day contest between 2 players. Will we ever see that day?
It is our responsibility to turn that world #1 prize money from $80,000 to $1 million.
I don't know, but I've been around pool since 1980, and I know many of you have been around longer than that. I have never seen so much happening to raise up professional pool. A small part of that is one of the most successful podcasts ever interviews a professional pool player for the first time. Why did Joe talk about the pool subculture in America? Because it's a part of pool's history, and Joe is a part of that subculture, and so are you and I. To talk about it does not mean that we condone it or promote it, nor does it mean that pool cannot rise above it and become lucrative for more than just a handful of the top players. Joe mentioned his motivation for possibly promoting pool matches was a comment by a friend talking about an old, worn-out champion pool player.
I don't want to be that guy when I'm his age. I don't want to be this guy who's amazing at pool, but he's just perpetually broke with no options and no future.
That was, I believe, a primary focus of the Rogan Gorst interview. I think he wants to help raise up pool. I believe that day is coming soon, and Fedor's interview is just one small indicator that it's happening. Let me know what you think in the comments. By the way, if you have not seen Joe Rogan's comedic impersonation of Earl Strickland, look for it on YouTube. It is hilarious. Joe mentions in the Gorst interview that he was not making fun of Earl. He loves Earl and hopes that one day Earl will go on the show.
I want you on, Earl. Come on. Come on, Earl. I'm your
That'd be
fan.
fun.
So come on, Earl. It would mean a lot to your fans and to pool. Go talk to Joe.